there were people within the United States government. The director of the FBI, James Comey, the director of the CIA, John Brennan, the director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, the deputy director, and an array of others in the NSC and the DOJ, who felt, A, that Hillary Clinton was going to win. They had followed the analytics and the polls.
Right.
90% surety. But they felt, as an insurance policy, that Donald Trump, for a variety of reasons, culturally, politically, socially, was unacceptable as president. And the very thought that he could be president was so foreign and disruptive that they felt they had a higher duty, a higher loyalty to stop that. So what did they do? They started to surveil his campaign. They put informants we know into his campaign. In October of 2016, they went to a federal surveillance court, FISA court, and diluted that court by not telling the true nature of opposition research from Hillary Clinton's campaign, which was unverified. And then they used that to surveil Carter Page, who had worked for Trump, but they were able to go back in time to a time when he was actively and surveil his communications and then reverse target that by tapping all the people that he had talked to. They, in the case of the National Security Agency, National Security Council, they requested names that came up in these surveillance that be on mask, and then they leaked them. How did this translate in real terms? If you and I were reading newspapers in September, October 2016, right. Mother Jones, Yahoo News, they were printing things that Trump was involved with the Russians, and that permeated the press. We forget that now. Then when Trump did the unthinkable, he won, both in anger at that fact, but also as a preemptive defense of their behavior. You see, because you got to remember the dialectic would have been, President Clinton, look at all I did for you. I should be rewarded. I went beyond the call of duty. And now the mentality went, my gosh, I've got legal exposure, so we've got to press further. So then it was a methodology of getting more FISA requests right. and disrupting the transition, and then finally the act that resulted in the Mueller report, the Mueller Commission, and then to dethrone. Well, it seems pretty clear that at some point Republican never-Trumpers during the primary season wanted to smear Donald Trump because he was ahead. So they hired Glenn Simpson at Fusion GPS, and they had a dossier, and then they lost. The Hillary Clinton campaign found out about that, contacted him and said, why don't you beef up your efforts? They hired Christopher Steele, a British spy, and he hired, to make sure that his results would be seated within the proper government authorities, he hired the wife of the fourth ranking person, Bruce Orr, to work on it. And they were paid through two firewalls. Hillary Clinton gave the money to the Democratic National Convention. They gave the money to GPS. GPS gave the money to Christopher Steele. If you've read the dossier carefully, I think if you and I say we don't know much about espionage or dossiers or Russia, I think you and I together in a week could have done a better job. We would have got the format, the scare capitals, these on this and alleged, it is said, it has been reported, one wonders, and then we would have done better. So we wouldn't have said that Michael Cohen's father-in-law was a major developer in Russia when he has one rental. Or we wouldn't say that Michael Cohen's wife is a Russian when she's never been to Russia, she's Ukrainian. We wouldn't have any of these details. We wouldn't say Michael Cohen was in Prague without investigating whether there was some passport or documentation that he had been. So it was all unverified. And yet, because it was salacious, things about sexual activity, when Steele then in the campaign through the Orrs briefed the FBI on it, they thought, wow, we can include this in the president's daily briefing, according to John Brennan and James Comey. We will bring in Mother Jones or Yahoo News, they were not the top tier because the top tier wasn't sure that even this thing could be true. And so they seeded it through them. James Baker, General Counsel of the FBI, they brought people from the Department of Justice, I think on August 1st of 2006. They briefed it. The director of the CIA briefed Harry Reid in the Senate. So it was Victoria Nuland in the State Department briefed people. So the effort was to get this out to as many people as possible so somebody would leak it and it would damage Donald Trump. And again, the irony was it was compiled by a foreign national who used foreign national sources, and they were paid by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and those facts were not told to the court that facilitated all of this by providing the government an excuse to surveil American citizens, at which point they found no evidence whatsoever. And so when you and I are talking about the dossier right now, no one has ever said this fact in the dossier I can prove and here's the proof.
Right.
And yet they deluded 4 judges and they deluded the country. The larger context of this was when he was elected, there was an effort to sue 3 states for the voting machines and nullify the election. There was a sustained effort to give the Steele dossier to the electors and to persuade the electors not to vote according to their constitutional mandates. Then there was almost immediately 60 representatives that voted for impeachment the week he was inaugurated. Then there was an effort to sue on the emoluments clause of the Constitution to remove him. Then there was the 25th Amendment psychodrama that went on for, and then finally there was Rob Rosenstein and Andrew McCabe meeting to see if they could poll cabinet members to remove him. This was in addition to the Stormy Daniels psychodrama, the Michael Cohen, the tax return. So there's been a sustained effort not to wait until 2020, but to remove the President of the United States under the idea that we are so moral and anointed unelected officials, we have a duty to somebody higher than the American people. And boil that down, and it was a coup attempt to destroy the presidency before its tenure had expired.
So basically it was any means necessary were okay to try to remove the sitting president.
I think so. I think these unelected bureaucrats, call them what you want, deep state, members of the administrative state, they're analogous to people in history that worked in the Byzantine court or the LS Corral during the Spanish Empire, or the people at Versailles. They were a permanent caste of unelected representatives that felt that the liberal progressive project under Obama would be continued for a 16-year interlude.
Right.
And that somebody who didn't deserve to be nominated under no circumstances should have been president, and who, when he was elected, should fail. That was not happening. So they called upon themselves to remove him. And I'm not trying to be over dramatic, because remember on September 5th of 2018, we had an anonymous op-ed in the New York Times. And that was geared, by the way, to come out at the same time of the Bob Woodward book.
Right, Fear.
It was a 1-2 punch, in which a person said, I am a Republican, deep state, bureaucratic appointee within the administration, and I'm trying to stop what I think are wrong decisions by the president. So I'm a member of the resistance. That's what he said.
Right.
That was trim away the imprimatur of the New York Times, and it was basically a call for insurrection.
Yeah, that's definitely how it read. I recall that very, very distinctly.
And the idea is that progressivism has taken over the Democratic Party, and progressivism itself is transmogrifying into socialism. And under that ideology, the law is flexible and malleable, and it's defined by what our ideas of morality are. The law can be good or bad depending on whether it serves our egalitarian agendas, which are basically equality of result, and a French revolutionary value system. And to the degree that you want to advance that, then the law makes the necessary adjustments. And that's what we've seen since Trump was elected. The media has always been left of center, but in the old days of Walter Cronkite or John Chancellor, when I was growing up, there was a sort of professional protocol that you weren't overt, you were implicit, but not overt. With the election of Trump, we've had people actually state, Jim Rutenberg in the New York Times, Christiane Amanpour at CNN, saying that Trump poses such a danger to the Republic that a reporter has a higher duty to become a partisan. And then this term fake news is not just a rhetorical smear by Donald Trump. I mean, if you look at CNN, just to take one network, they reported that the bust of Martin Luther King was removed. It was not. They reported that James Comey would testify that he told Trump that he was under investigation. He did not do that. They said the Trump Tower meeting, Trump knew in advance. He did not know in advance. They said that Donald Trump was tipped off by the weekend. They admit they didn't know that. Anderson Cooper had to apologize for using some really crude language on the air about Trump. Reza Aslan, the religious editor, had to resign for using a smear. Two CNN reporters joked on a hot mic about Trump crashing. You remember Kathy Griffin held up the decapitated head at a CNN. That's just one network. And so, again, they become a fusion party of the media and the Progressive Democratic Party. They're together. And you can see that with the WikiLeaks when the Podesta Trove was released to the public. You had people like Dana Milbank or Glenn Thrush. These are marquee reporters that were writing to John Podesta and says, I'm really a hack, but I want you to proofread this and you object and I'll make any changes you want, as if the media has to have the Clinton campaign
approval or something.
Approval, yeah. Can't remember of that happening in the United States. And this is all juxtaposed to the idea that Donald Trump hasn't done anything illegal to reporters. He may have talked about fake news and the media is the enemy of the people, but he hasn't surveilled people like Barack Obama did with the Associated Press reporters or with Fox News, James Rosen, where they actually broke into their accounts and surveilled their communication. So that's what's so bizarre about it. We're in such a degree of polarization and hatred of Trump that it's blinded all reason. And so we don't say Russia. What has Trump done with Russia? Well, he has upped the sanctions. He's killed Russians in Syria. He's been tough in the air over Syria. He's increased oil production by 3 million barrels. It hurts Russian oil. He's forced NATO to spend more. He's beefed up defense. He has tried to restore missile defense in Eastern Europe that Obama canceled on the hot mic. So he's been much more aggressive on Russia. But yet we have this albatross around his neck of Russian collusion. Three, it's very hard to prove obstruction of a non-crime. If you work for me and I see that you're shoplifting and I say to you, I don't think you should shoplift, it might be bad for our reputation, that's not obstructing your behavior or getting involved, it's just advice. So when Trump kept saying, I think this is a witch hunt, I wouldn't do that if I were you, that turns out to be pretty wise advice because collusion was not found. So it's kind of down to how can you obstruct a non-crime? The second half of this story is now the first chapter of the second half, and that is the hunters are going to be hunted, and the inquisitors are going to be inquired about. And I think we're going to be shocked at what happened.